I'm going to start this off by saying no one is going to believe this. It seems like every damn one of these stories starts off with those same words, but what I'm about to tell you is absolutely in a league of its own. I witnessed it with my own eyes, and I'm still not over it. I've been diagnosed with severe PTSD, and I go to counseling every other week. For years it was once a week, and that was after my release from the loony bin. I say loony bin only to make light of the situation and help me deal with it. I use humor in that way. I respect everyone that has mental illness and in no way want to downplay how important talking to someone after a tragic event truly is. Before this happened, I thought shrinks were just con artists and people just needed to man up and deal with their issues. Needless to say, I no longer feel that way, and I'm grateful to have found a therapist that accepts what happened to me. I don't know if he believes me or not. Probably not, but he does believe that something happened to me that day. I guess that's about all I can really ask for. I've kept this quiet for 11 years, but I believe I'm ready to put it out there. I'm not going to give my name or do any interviews, so I'd prefer that you don't even ask. I'm giving you this in writing for you to share because I know there are people out there that have had similar experiences but can't talk about it. I'm just here to tell you, it helps to talk. There are people out there that won't laugh or call you crazy, and it may not happen the first therapist you talk to, but eventually you'll find one you're comfortable with. Please stay strong and get the help you need. PTSD is very real, and it cripples you. This is what happened to me. First, let me warn anyone that may read or hear this encounter. This is very traumatic and violent. If blood and violence are a trigger for you, you probably need to stop here. Hell, I'm shaking now as I type this. Despite my jokes about the loony bin, this is no laughing matter. The guilt that I feel to this very day is so overwhelming. My life was saved that day by something that paid the ultimate price in doing so. There's no way I could ever repay the debt I owe. But if sharing this story is somehow doing that, then I should have shared it a long time ago. I used to visit the LBL, or land between the lakes, on a regular basis. I live in southern Kentucky, and my late father would take my brothers and I there to hike and just enjoy nature. We did a lot of camping where he would teach us basic survival skills. Some of the best memories I have are from that place. It's also where the worst thing I've ever been a part of took place. It was from the times there with my dad and brothers that I developed my love for backcountry solo camping. Anytime life got to be too much and I needed to reset, to the woods I would go for a few days. That's exactly what I was doing when this happened. It was sometime in the fall of 2012, I believe. It was a Friday and I had finished setting up camp. I was able to get a spot relatively close to where I could park my truck. This wasn't always the case, and I had no idea how crucial that would eventually turn out to be. I'd say the truck was about a football field away down a pretty worn-down trail. It was around midday when I decided to go for a hike. The weather was absolutely gorgeous, and I wanted to take advantage of it. I'd say I was gone a couple hours when I decided it was time to head back. That's when things got weird. What had been an awesome day suddenly took a turn, and I got that feeling in the pit of my stomach. You know that feeling like something is wrong or something bad is about to happen. You feel worried all of a sudden, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but I gotta think I'm not the only one that gets that way sometimes. Anyway, all I wanted to do was get back to camp as quickly as I could, so I gotta move on. About halfway back, something red caught my eye. It was about 10 feet or so off trail and laying underneath some bushes. I moved closer to get a better look, and what I was seeing just isn't making sense. Once it finally hit me what it was I was looking at, I gasped and almost fell to the ground as I stumbled backwards trying to get away from it. It was a damn human hand. The red I saw was blood and tendons from the wrist area. With my hand over my mouth, I started to inch forward to get a better look. I guess it was mostly to confirm this is actually what I was seeing. Then I started thinking it's got to be a mannequin with ketchup or something, and it's just a prank that some punk-ass kid is playing. I'm trying to make something that's completely unfathomable somehow make sense, but it's just not working. But there was no doubt. This was a human hand. It looked like it belonged to an adult white male. It was a left hand and had a gold band on the ring finger. This was someone's husband, quite possibly someone's father. I had never experienced anything like this. I was in some pretty uncharted waters. I wasn't about to touch the thing, and I knew I had to get back and alert the proper authorities. I didn't walk back. I ran. I was so creeped out the whole way. I was almost back to camp when it happened. The most ungodly demonic roar from the absolute depths of hell rang out. I felt this roar in every part of my body. The only thing I could compare it to, if I had to compare it to anything you would recognize, would be a lion. I'd seen a few in my time at a couple different zoos I'd been to and heard a couple of them roar. I don't know if it was me just being scared out of my mind, but this seemed louder than what I had heard from the zoo. I dipped and ducked down like someone was shooting at me. That's how bad it scared me. I turned around just in time to see this thing leap from the top of a huge rock onto the trail behind me. From the research I've done since this encounter, I know it now to be what people call a dog man. This thing looked like a German shepherd. Well, a monster with a German shepherd head anyway. When it landed, it went down to a crouching position. It just stayed there in that position, growling at me. I started to back my way towards my camp, and when I did, it stood up on 2 feet and began to creep towards me. I knew I was a dead man. The hand I just found came to mind, and I now knew how it got there. I started to pick up my pace, still walking backwards so I didn't turn my back to it. Okay, as if this wasn't hard enough to believe, it's about to get even crazier. When I picked up my pace, this thing let out this growl or bark kind of noise and started to run at me. What happened next happened so fast. It was all a blur, but this giant Sasquatch sprung from out of the brush and launched its shoulder into this damned mutt and sent it flying. I mean, it flew at least a dozen feet through the air before hitting the ground, and when it hit, it rolled and bounced another 5 or 6 feet. When it came to a stop, it just sat there on its ass with this shocked look on its face. It then shook its head and started to snarl and growl. It jumped up on all fours. They stared each other down for just a second before the dog man charged. When it got to within a few feet, the Bigfoot turned slightly, and in a roundhouse motion backhanded this thing across its face and sent it flying again. The dog man had the exact same reaction as it did the first time, but this time got up and back at him much faster. As the Bigfoot raised its arm to give him another whack across its face, another dog man came crashing out of the woods with another right behind it. The bigger of the two latched down on the Bigfoot's arm, and the smaller got him by his ankle. I will never forget the sound that Bigfoot made. He screamed out in pain, and the third dog man, the one that started the whole thing, jumped up and latched on to what looked like the neck area of the Sasquatch. I just stood there frozen like an idiot. That was when I heard this voice in my head that was not my own. This strange, rough voice says to me, "Run. Go now. Run." I instantly snapped out of it and started booking it out of there. I was so happy that I was able to park so close to my camp. I made it to the truck, got in, and sped out of there. I went straight to the ranger station and told the ranger on duty that we needed the police out there now and what I had found. I also told him about the fight I witnessed and how this Bigfoot saved my life. To my surprise, he didn't call me crazy. He just said, "All right, I'll call it in." I thought it was weird that he didn't just grab his radio and call for help. Instead, he said, "Excuse me a minute," and stepped into the back room with the landline in hand. I couldn't hear what he was saying. Almost like he was intentionally speaking softly for me not to hear. He came back out and said, "They're on their way now." About an hour goes by, and to my shock and surprise, it's not the police that shows up. There's 2 black Chevy Suburbans and 2 military-style Humvees. A small army gets out, and they're all kind of strapped and looking like they're getting ready for war. The guy that I could tell was in charge came over to me and shook my hand. He asked me to repeat exactly what happened. I did. And he asked me to tell them where I was camped and about where the hand was. He told me to write down my name and address and leave it with the ranger, and I was free to go. He never threatened me with violence like I've heard some people report. He never even told me not to tell anyone. Just thanked me and told me I was very lucky to be leaving there. A week or so later, all of my equipment was mailed back to me. That's why they needed my address, I suppose. As I mentioned in the beginning, the aftermath of this ordeal has been so extremely unbearable. When I got home, I broke down and the floodgates opened. I sat in my driveway crying like I had never cried before. I made myself get out of the truck and go inside. I jumped in the shower and continued to cry and shake. I was of course grateful to be alive, but the guilt I felt was so extreme. This Bigfoot gave his life to save mine. I obviously didn't see it die, but the sounds it was making and the blood that was pouring out of him and flying all around, there's no way anything could have lived through that. I'd say the first dog man I saw would be between 6'6" and 7 feet tall, and when it charged, the Bigfoot was at least 2 feet taller and so much more broad. If it had been a fair one-on-one fight, the Sasquatch would not have had much problem. But when those other two jumped in, it was over. I completely shut down after this happened. My girlfriend left me. She honestly thought I lost my mind, and I guess just couldn't deal with everything that goes with that kind of trauma. I admitted myself into a mental health hospital for treatment. I was going to lose my job if I didn't. I'll admit, at first that was the only reason I did. I honestly did not expect it to help me. Now 11 years later, and I'm still going to therapy. It has helped me so much. I never did hear anything else about that day. Never heard any reports of any missing people, but I'll admit I rarely ever watch the news, so I may have just missed it. I don't know. No one ever contacted me about anything, and like I said, no one told me I couldn't talk about it, so here I am. Over a decade later, and I'm just now sharing it. I would be interested to know if anyone out there knows anything about what happened that day. Well, there you have it. I honestly don't care who believes me and who doesn't. I don't go to the land between the lakes anymore, and I caution anyone else